All right, it looks like we're ready to go. My name is Kamal Sinclair, and I am so honored to be here with you, and especially honored to follow incredible talks that you've already given. I'm going to come from the art side of this kind of conversation. I work at the Sundance Institute, which is the Sundance Film Festival. We have year-round activities that support artists in the art and form of their storytelling practices, and the New Frontier program for the last 14 years has been working with artists that are innovating the art and form of story by pushing beyond the boundaries of the traditional screen or proscenium. And about 2 years ago, I was commissioned by the Ford Foundation to do a kind of a survey of the field through the lens of their core mission, which is equality, as we're trying to navigate kind of innovating the forms of story around the emerging media that are coming, the technology that's allowing different kinds of storytelling. And so I'm going to try to quickly give you an overview of what I found talking to over 100 people in the field from very different backgrounds, trying to wrestle with the idea of equality in emerging media. And particularly, as we know, equality is a very broad category that just doesn't mean race and gender, but also neurodiversity. When I first got my job at Sundance 7 years ago, my boss, Michelle Satter, who was number 2 employee after Redford at Sundance, she said, okay, it's our job to make sure that we are finding artists that make meaning. And for about 2 or 3 years, I thought she meant finding artists that are making meaningful work. And I didn't understand the difference until I was sitting in Fault in Our Stars, of all movies, on a matinee by myself, and saw this movie about cancer, and all of the all of the weight of the reality of my relationship with my mother as she went through her cancer battle kind of hit me all at once, the meaning of it. I don't know if any of you have gone through that kind of a caregiving relationship with a loved one where it's kind of very pedestrian, where can I get you some tea? Do you need your medicine? Are you feeling nauseous? Do you want to lay down? It's a very kind of pedestrian relationship, and you kind of don't really deal with, or at least in my family, we didn't deal with the heaviness of the mortality that was in every second of those moments. And it wasn't until years later, after she had gone through recovery and mastectomy, that I was sitting in this thing, and the weight of every one of those interactions kind of hit me all at once. And I realized what my boss meant about artists that make meaning in our lives, that help us to make meaning in our lives. And so I'm going to say something that might be arguable, but I think over the last 500 years, we have been in a kind of an epoch of communication, of the human communication architecture, where storytelling lives and where meaning is made in that way, that has been called mass media. And from the moment that people were able to have a printed book in their home, maybe having a Bible and access to it for the first time, and being able to kind of connect with knowledge themselves, to seeing the Vietnam War from their living rooms and seeing the front lines of war, to seeing Earth from space, this mass media epoch in human communication disrupted our sense of reality. And we had to contend with the ways in which it challenged what we understood from previous traditions in terms of who we are in our place in the universe and in our place in humanity. And it was the artists and the philosophers that joined in with the scientists and the technologists to try to make meaning out of this disruption to our sense of reality. You had movements such as postmodernism and Dadaism and surrealism, existentialism, all of these ways in which artists were trying to contend with, well, what does this mean? How do we make meaning out of this? And so I would say that over the last 40 years, we've entered into a new epoch in the communication architecture, a new epoch in the media, like what media looks like, and it is again disrupting our sense of what we understand as reality. So we've got not only interactivity in terms of the internet and everything that we know very intimately about that new capacity in the human communication architecture, but we also have increasingly more immersive media. We have integrated media. We have embedded media into our bodies now with this is really kind of fringe, but first internet-enabled people, the cyborgs that are emerging. We also have a system that is becoming more intelligent constantly around us, and we have, in terms of the Internet of Things, a distributed kind of omnisphere of the ways in which communication happens. And so again, the artists are stepping up and trying to understand how this is disrupting our sense of reality, and they're trying to make meaning out of it. And I have the good pleasure of being able to watch them as they do that, so I can hopefully share a little bit of that with you. The other thing I want to say, which really links to what you were talking about, both of you were talking about earlier, is that we understand story as kind of the code for the operating system of humanity. It's story that helps us to communicate information, to share information over generations, to help signal identity performance, to kind of in some ways, if you think about epigenetics, even the ways in which we hear story and how it kind of impacts our own, just hearing trauma, how that can actually impact our physical beings and our physical bodies. So story is really critical, and also imagination as that. So you have imagination is the precursor, whether in the sciences or in the arts or in any other field. Our imagination precedes manifestation of that into reality, innovating that into reality. And so story is critical, and I'll talk a little bit more about that and how that came up in this research around equality. So first, I'm gonna give the fastest, you don't have to remember all this, it's online, survey of what people defined as emerging media. Some artists are playing with touch and trying to reconnect with the emotional relationship to physical touch that we lose in virtual spaces and in more digital spaces. This is a piece where an artist took 10 women that had gone through some of the worst atrocities of the human condition, Darfur, Holocaust, and she wrote their stories in a physical book in the installation. So you sat and you read a page or two of their stories. Then you walk up to a door with a black screen, and you just put your hand on the blackness. And through a randomized algorithm, a life scale, one of those women will walk up slowly to you and put her hand on your hand. And that messed people up. Like there was something about our, you would know more about our lizard brain, but something about physical touch. Artists are still trying to reach through the digital tools to still keep that engaged in our emotional relationship. We have interactive, documentary. We have ephemeral media. One of the people I interviewed said that, the generation of people that grew up tracked on Facebook their whole lives is seeking for a bit of the ritual of the ephemeral, the moment, the scarcity of time, aspects of our rituals that we may have lost in that way. Escape rooms and immersive theater, nonlinear storytelling and omnidirectional storytelling, geolocative and geomapped storytelling. This is a novel that plays out over the entire country where you get to see the story kind of really mapped to the landscape and architecture around you. Geo-aware composition. This is an artist that has created a symphony that's mapped to the mall in Washington. So 400 different pathways, depending on how you meander, where you might hear 400 different compositions of this based on how your physical body is sitting and standing in space. Hybridity. This is an artist that lived through the 1979 revolution and wanted to give Westerners a sense of what it means to be in the fog of war and have to make moral and physical and survival choices without the benefit of distance, and did an incredible achievement with this and got a BAFTA nomination. Participatory media, data storytelling as a tool. This is kind of the traditional kind of data storytelling we're used to, but now artists in the Internet of Things are looking at ambient data storytelling. So this is an Afrofuturist group in Brooklyn that created a lantern speculative object that works, that when you walk around New York City, whenever you pass a place where a black person has been killed by a police officer, it lights up. And so there's no screen, there's no audio, but the depth of the story in place is so strong. Artists are playing with the home AIs and creating conversational podcasting where you're in conversation with the characters and the story can take over your home electronics. This is a seance, by the way. Olfactory storytelling. This is an artist that puts you through the last moments of JFK's life through sound and the smells that would have happened, that he would have smelled in the last moments of his life. Obviously, immersive media, room scale immersive media. This is a researcher that was working with schizophrenic patients and found that when he created alternate body experiences, like flying as a hawk over San Francisco and giving them full mobility, that it actually started to reconcile some of the anxiety that they felt in that condition. Live performance avatars. This is another theater piece where they're performing live with live virtual puppeteering. This is a piece that came where they've tracked food, physical food. So you're eating something that might be cotton candy in the real world, but it looks like a flamingo, wild Alice in Wonderland contraption in the virtual world. So kind of changing with the physical and the. This is an artist that is putting himself in the perspective of another person in real time for 30 days and staying in VR. He's done 3-day trials. He has not done the 30-day run, but he tries to mirror the other person's activities like brushing their teeth, going to the bathroom, sleeping. I don't know how he's handling sex, but this is the National Theatre in the UK. This is a one-to-one actor-to-audience experience where it's a mother going through cancer battle with their child, and they draw together in space. It's all tracked in VR exactly, so when she hugs you, the avatar hugs you, she puts you to bed, and everyone that's experienced it has said it's a highly compelling experience. Social VR, this is a social VR experience where this is your VR experience, this is your physical experience that you're having, so there's a real fidelity to your body, to the avatar, and to each other. I won't go into that. Augmented reality. And then artificial intelligence, so co-creating with algorithms and with smart technologies. This is the first screenplay that was written by an AI, including props and dress and costumes and blocking. You should look at it. It's pretty hilarious to see how an AI writes a script. This is Frankenstein AI. They brought a social AI to Sundance that started out as a toddler, kind of gibberishy, and then it learned through the emotional cues and the interviews that it had with thousands of people that came through the festival throughout 10 days and developed to something that I would say is akin to an adolescent social personality. And then at the end was able to puppet a full performance of lights, sound, real-time projection mapping images pulled from the internet, as well as a dancer with an earpiece, all based on the emotional landscape of the thousands of people that they scanned while we were there. This is another artist who's questioning the future of work as emotional labor in an AI-disrupted work future. She performs as the human interface between the algorithm and your home. So she performs as your Alexa for a week. And she is playing with the idea of if emotional labor is the bulk of the future of work, then what is it that I can do that an AI can never do, but still she utilizes smart systems in order to serve you as best. She won a couple of awards for this. And then she did it again for a cocktail party where she gave the AI system all of the data, the social data of all of her, from social media sites of all of her guests. The AI constructed the perfect 8 people to come to the cocktail party in clumps of 1 hour each. And then she had an earpiece and the AI puppeted her every word, every move. She told, so she made all the introductions based on how the AI had a signature event, had a happening. And just again, to see, if AI is going to be helping us to construct, like she was really disturbed by the idea of Google Home and Alexa, because she was like, this is where we form our most sensitive and important bonds and identity. So what does it mean to facilitate parenthood or intimacy with a spouse, or through this mediation of a home AI? And so she's challenging these things with these kind of provocations. And then there's this kind of an AI use where they've used volumetric capture to capture a hologram of a Holocaust survivor, and they've basically asked over 1,000 questions, put it into a database, and through natural language processing, you can have a pretty faithful conversation with someone who's passed. So this is questioning the future of memoir and our relationship to ancestry, and not just a flat, stagnant version of them, but one that you can be in communication and ask your questions as you go through your own life questioning moments as a young person coming into adulthood. And then Magic Leap has this woman who is full-size hologram. She came to the festival. She can be in a room with you. She had me put a painting on the wall, and then she took the painting out of the wall as a 3D object and handed it to me. It was crazy. She doesn't talk yet, but and there's problematic issues with her, but yeah, she exists. And then artists that are even playing with Bitcoin. This is an indigenous artist who, if the Iroquois Nation really created the first constitution that our forefathers adopted, that's lost in our history and that's been erased. So she's looking at Bitcoin and I mean, not just Bitcoin, but the whole crypto currency, the whole blockchain ecosystem, to how do we not have narratives erased going forward in our histories. And then this is a black woman who found out that the most socially advanced AI on the planet was a black woman. And so she was like, I need to find out who is this robot. And she came to meet her and realized that she is made on the foundational lived data of one black woman, but her programmers are all white men, and there were significant missing data nuances in the representation of this black woman. She would say things like, oh, my masters, talking to her about her programmer. She was like, ain't no black woman calling nobody their masters. And so she ended up approaching them and saying, this is a blind spot. And they said, well, we don't know how to program her to be a black woman. Do you want to be in conversation with her? So she was in conversation with her for 4 years. And to help with that evolution. But that's problematic because there's no just one kind of black woman, right? So now she's creating a project called Not the Only One, which is an AI that is being generated on the lived data of 3 generations of women in her family, one born in the 30s, one in the 60s, and one in the 90s, to understand what does it mean to replicate identity in this AI infrastructure, and what are the missing things. And instead of planetary scale data like the Twitter bot that got very racist and sexist and homophobic within 24 hours, how do we do deep, protected data, longitudinal data that helps to develop a sense of what it means to be in an identity community or in an identity framework, which is the exact opposite of what Google and IBM are doing. And so she's now going to be doing this as a 100-year project with her family. And then you have biometric, tracking. This is a video game you can play with brain activity. This is a physical game where you have to try to get you have biometrics on your body, and the more calm you can kind of center yourself and the biometrics can read that you're in a calm state, the higher your body gets lifted and the more crazy it gets around you with lights and ticker tape and sound. And it's a gamification of meditation to see if you can maintain a center. And it's replicated after performers that have to maintain a center while being in very frenetic environments. So artists are seeing human beings as becoming more cyborgonian and therefore changing the canvas with these communication devices of how story is, constructed. And there are actually cyborgs in the world, like this gentleman who's colorblind and has been wearing this device for many years that allows him to hear sound. And the ways in which people that are, like we have become with our cell phones, an extended appendage of our bodies and given a superhuman sight, like being able to see from from a satellite view in the palm of your hand. It's changing the relationship of our ability to understand reality from different perspectives. And like there's an artist that wears things on her body that sends real-time seismic data in vibrations to her body. And she's a dancer, choreographer, and she, like the guy that found out that if you split open an atom, it's mostly empty space and got freaked out about walking on the ground the next day, she feels like that about the earth now because she's in constant relationship with an earth that's in what feels like breathing. So these are the ways in which these technologies are changing our sense of reality, right? And then the last one that I want to talk about is the ways in which artists are hacking into the DNA. So this artist went around New York City and collected cigarette butts, fingernails, gum, hair, and not only was able to hack into knowing everything about your ancestry and your health that a DNA molecule, your DNA analysis can provide, but she also used the FBI DNA profiling system to 3D print your face. And so artists are trying to create this provocation around identity and around privacy and are we post-privacy and all these things. And what is the mental kind of, we know from the panopticons, like what does it mean to be living in a society culturally that is post-privacy if we are? And then the last bit is that artists are looking at is the DNA as media itself. As we know, we can encode data onto DNA molecules. And when I talked to the artist that's doing a documentary around this, I said, well, does this mean that like in the future my cloned family dog could have the family archive on it? And she said, maybe. But then I met with a Silicon Valley entrepreneur in biotech, and I said, should I be concerned about this? What's the issues around equality that we should be concerned with in terms of turning to DNA as storage, as media storage? And he said, no, I wouldn't be too concerned because, it's just storage. You can't do like a DNA DVD. Like it's hard to recall out. It's just for long-term efficient storage, which, makes sense, maybe more environmentally friendly. But then Caltech created the first neural network on DNA molecules last summer. And so these are the ways in which, 500 years ago, only God could create smart organic matter. So now artists are having to contend with what does it mean for us as human beings without a sperm and an egg to create smart organic matter. So I won't go much further, but the key thing that I wanted, these are different trends that we're seeing in terms of social art practice and the ways in which people are questioning reality. Even Bank of America said there's a 20% chance we're in the Matrix. And and the ways in which the sciences and the arts, so like this is a research center that uses virtual reality, exoskeletons, and brain activity, kind of machines that can read brain activity, so paraplegics can say, move my leg, they see their leg moving, and then their legs move. And after 6 months, they're able to hold their bowels and move their toes. And so we're talking about technology that'll be used for storytelling and media and entertainment that'll have that level of connection to our physical being. What does that mean for the images that we're putting on into that environment? And this, I think, is the best place to leave. The progress of justice, I would say justice more broadly in terms of all the diversity that we need. The progress of justice and the development of technologies are not linear. Every time you develop a new technology, you need to have a thought process about the history and systems of oppression that the technology is being created and released into. Think about ways to bend the technology to justice and not allow it to replicate, entrench, and worsen injustice. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.